My name is Tutilo Mudumba. I'm a PhD student in the RECAP laboratory, the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. I'm also the co-director of the Snares to Wares initiative based here at MSU. My research entails understanding the relationship between wildlife in the national park, using lions as the proxy species to understand wildlife, and that relationship with people living in a small town called Pakwach in Uganda. Before MSU, I researched lions in Uganda in the same landscape that we are conducting the Snares to Wares initiative in Uganda. So by researching lions, I led and I established and then led the lion monitoring project, where we're interested in understanding the effects of human pressure on the populations of lions on the northern bank of Uganda, of Murchison Falls, excuse me. So before I joined MSU, I was a carnivore researcher in Uganda, where I established a lion monitoring project in Murchison Falls National Park. And our interest then was to understand the key drivers, especially those driven by humans, that were affecting the population of lions there. And that work came out of the national census in Uganda of lions and hyenas, which found that Murchison Falls was the park with the lowest decline of lions in 10 years. In the whole of Uganda, it was way below the national average of the decline. And also, Murchison Falls happened to be the only national park, it's the largest national park, but had the biggest, the smallest number of hyenas of all the national parks in Uganda. My work also was not about monitoring lions only. It also involved responding to the human-wildlife conflict in the area. And so I was the person they would call when carnivores or predators wandered into the community and took a cow or took a calf. I worked hand in hand with Uganda wildlife authorities to control and determine if the animal needed to be moved and where it would be moved back into the national park. And so I did that for about 7 years before coming to MSU for the PhD. While in Uganda, conducting research on lions, I was doing that work for the most part with the skills of an undergrad student. I had a background of a bachelor's degree in conservation biology on the onset of the lion monitoring project. So somewhere in 2011, I applied at the University of Oxford to try and get better at what I was doing. So I was seeking skills and develop myself. So I was lucky and got a Panthera funded scholarship that runs out of Wild Crew. It's actually a Kaplan funded scholarship that runs out of Wild Crew. So I did a course which taught me how to conserve wildlife and also how to conduct my studies in a more organized way. Little did I know that my presence at Oxford had left an impression, that several years later, it was through Oxford that Dr. Montgomery found me while he was working there as an associate professor and seeking to do research in Uganda. Somebody there mentioned that he could contact me if he wanted to conduct research in East Africa. And so he contacted me on whether I was interested in doing a PhD here. But before then, I had mentioned to one of the professors at the university that I was not yet satisfied with my qualifications, that I was actively seeking out training to better my skills of a conservation researcher. And so when Dr. Montgomery mentioned his intentions, my name was floating already as one of the people who were interested. And so it didn't take much convincing for me to accept the position here. Right.
Okay. Yeah. You were saying?
So those are the circumstances under which I got to come to Michigan State University to do my PhD. I always seek out skills, and I knew that Michigan State University offered a very competitive course in wildlife management, which you cannot find in Uganda.
One of the major things of this course and the purpose for conducting this interview is to learn more about Snares to where did this start, in other words?
Okay, I should say that while researching lions in Uganda, I was actively involved, though not officially, but I was actively involved in the day-to-day happenings of the people living near the national park. One, I was dependent on them for sources of food, so I was accessing the same markets as those people. And I soon developed friends and started talking about the issues with them in a way of, one, finding a social circle, because lion research can be very grilling on you. You're usually isolated away from your family, and the only other people you have are usually hundreds of kilometers away because they don't live on the same location as your study species. Predators can't work like that. And so the nearest social group I could fit in was the people of Pakwach, and I was so touched with the way they conducted themselves. I got to appreciate the sorts of problems that made them conduct themselves in certain ways. I learned a little bit more of how they related with wildlife and what sorts of problems they were involved in, either derived from the interaction with wildlife or other financial, social issues. And so not long after I'd started my discussions with those boys, that we started having this conversation about what do you do? Can we join you in the Land Cruiser? What sorts of work do you have in the park? And I was happy to always take them with me in the Land Cruiser so they would see wildlife. Of course, it wasn't something that was new to them, but it was one of the only occasions when they were interacting with wildlife in a peaceful way. The other thing is that whenever I had a little task, or whether in the design of the experiments or helping do one aspect of research that needed manual labor, because most of these children are not, or rather most of the people there are not so skilled in ecological studies. But whenever I needed any help that they would give, I relied on them. And so I understand the Murchison Falls landscape very well. I have friends there, and I knew right away that some of the problems that the wildlife were faced were directly linked to the people in a certain way that was not as obvious from the onset. And the other thing that was going on inside the national park was that most of the lions I was researching were ending up in wire snares, and these wire snares were requiring us to do almost fire brigade rescues every now and then. So go and try to save a lion and stop, and then go try to save a lion. But Murchison Falls had not had an active snare removal program. And so when I talked to the rangers, I was like, how do you guys get rid of the snares? They were like, we don't have any money to conduct systematic removals. And so while monitoring lions, I did initiate systematic removal of lions, rather of wire snares from the landscape. This involved utilizing some basic skills in GIS to construct maps of the landscape, isolate habitats that I, from experience and from data points of wire locations, harbored or had a higher probability of snare occurrence. And so that was a very successful venture in that we collected so many wire snares. But the lions still ended up dying in wire snares. By the time I was getting I got in touch with Dr. Montgomery, the snaring of lions was still there, but we had amassed this heap of wire snares at the overlanding, where they were being recycled at times back into the landscape, or whenever we could cut them into pieces. So that's the context under which I came from Uganda to join Michigan State. Now on coming, everybody in the area was really happy for me to travel and extend my academic credentials. everyone was excited. The people of Pakwach knew I was coming to do further studies. They couldn't understand what else I needed to know, but they realized that the importance of traveling to get skills. The Uganda Wildlife Authority people were aware, and this gave me their blessings to come. And so for about 4-5 months, I was away here to try and get my PhD off the ground and try and seek funding for these studies that lay ahead of me. At the end of that period, I returned to Uganda to try and readjust my study methodology and to understand a little bit more of what I really wanted to do in the usual summer research sessions that are common in all universities with graduate students. And so it was during that time that an idea cropped up, and this idea involved what other things besides following lions, which I'd been doing for a long time, could be done. And so I had a very interesting discussion with my advisor about the nature of the landscape, about the people, and it was during that conversation that I mentioned the strange case of boys in the town who were pushing around toys and wires and other products that they had made out of the same material that was killing lions in the landscape. And that's the idea. That's what led to the idea of having a systematic crafting of wildlife product or sculptures.
What were some of the initial obstacles in the beginning to actually start this project?
I think the biggest one was convincing the youth themselves that we work with, that this is something that makes sense, that they wanted to, so that they would invest their time and skill, and not just one of those rushed things that are dropped on them and then the next day they go away. So it was getting the youth to understand the potential for the craft itself to change their lives, so that they would invest time in creating them. And once we got that part of the story sorted, it was easy. I mean, the youth were living at the very bottom of the social circle in Pakwach town. So the other challenge was changing how they are perceived in their community, and tolerating the grouping of people who are considered as vagabonds in their community into, sitting either to work near somebody's shop and letting people, appreciate, by especially when I started associating with them closely, that they could amount to something beneficial and not just stealing the next item on the street, or for the case of the Wildlife Management Authority, expand on their maybe snaring because of the knowledge I may not pass on to them directly. And so once those community and personal tensions and suspicions were brought to light and discussed openly, because we needed to have everybody on board. The other I've mentioned briefly was to get UWA to engage the boys directly in a different way. Uganda Wildlife Authority has got a community conservation department, but this unit usually works with already established groups. It doesn't work with individuals in the community. And so these boys were missing out on the benefits of the community conservation unit. And so by bringing them together, all of a sudden we had them into a force that could be then could negotiate for, say, benefits of accessing the park and stuff like that. And one of the benefits they got was now they would be summoned to volunteer. Now volunteering there would mean they would have a meal, they would have a free trip to the national park, and just go and maybe clean up the landing or help or paint a building or participate in cleaning the roads and stuff like that. So that volunteering in national park opened very many doors for the boys, and let them even appreciate wildlife more than before. And then in the more technical part was, one of the technical problems was understanding how this thing would work between Uganda and the United States. because I was the key person in Uganda, and I was the same almost necessary integral part in the United States where I was conducting my studies. It was difficult for us to maintain a foothold to keep the youth organized when I traveled out of Uganda. So the first few months were really difficult, having to spend very many hours on a phone, because by then most of them didn't even have phones. So I would call somebody in the community to go and try to chase down the boys to talk to me and to keep their morale going that this thing is working, which was not easy. So it was such logistical challenges at the early stages that kept us busy and sometimes even motivated to work harder because we didn't have it the easy way. So on top of my head, those I think are the main challenges. And once we jumped to that, then it was all about the market forces, getting our product made in the proper style, so better crafts made in Pakwach, or getting them to the right shelf in the United States.
What were some of the challenges for you when coming to learning these different approaches?
Right, and the question of one, individual lack of skill set to do things properly is always there, and we from actually the onset, we knew we're not going to make jacks of all trades. We were not going to be very good at ecology if we're going to be very good at business. When we're trying to run our lives as businessmen, then we would lose out on some parts. And so that was very clear from the onset, that we would need very useful and productive links with the people of the right skills. And however, this does not stop us from recognizing the need for our skill set. For instance, understanding that unless there is a link between the conservation of wildlife in the area and our budding snares to wares, then we wouldn't be participating in what we're designed to make. So the numbers, for instance, outside in the community of how many crafts are being sold should have a very good and simple relationship between the number of wildlife we're saving. And this is important to us in two ways. First is that as many crafts are being sold, we are hoping to see an improvement in the welfare of people. So that would make us very happy to have more happy people and more self-sustaining people who would stop heavily relying on the national park for protein. But most closer to our hearts was the idea of animal numbers and how they were doing and how they were being impacted by the wire snares. In that sense, as snares outside the community are reducing, we expect the number of lions to be increasing. So as the community gets better and better, we're hoping to see a positive change in the population of not only the lions that were our study species, but also other species such as elephants. And to go back to the part of running a business as a person who is trained to do something else, I would say a little more that with the right partners and with the right connections and acknowledging that we didn't know some things, it was much easier than we thought it would be. For instance, we got very close to the development department of Michigan State University, which is a specialized group of people who have done this thing over and over, and they gave us very excellent opportunities to interface with business people in the right setting for us to just tell them what we knew. We got in touch with people who know how to tell the story in a better way, so who advised us again on what is important for people to hear, because we're dealing with a product that needed to be marketed and that needed to be packaged in the right way. And so all those helped to make everything easier on our part, but most importantly is recognizing our weaknesses and then working to strengthen them using outside external expertise.
Going a little bit into this course, the Snares to Wares course, and how you and Dr. Montgomery really planned on integrating the student voice, undergraduate voice, into this course. What value do you see in such a course in terms of how different the course is from other lecture-based offerings? And how do you think this course will impact Snares to Wares in the present and in the future?
All right, and I should have said that we also recognized from the start that for this thing to, for the Snares to Wares rather to work properly, it had to be run in a different way than other things that had not been successful. So we're not going to sit around and say we are going to run this old school. We're not going to sit around and not recognize the power of social media and other tools that were at our disposal. They were maybe too far away out of our generation to reach, and so the idea was, how do we harness all these to the benefit of the project? And so this is where the course, the Snares to Wares course came in. Recognizing the power of the youth, especially the underground, in the creative spheres, in the social media sphere, we sought a way of including their energy, including their creativity in managing this project, in harnessing their availability of time, because most undergrads have a bit more time than maybe somebody running a bank, or maybe somebody who is more committed with their family. So we realized all this strength, and that's where the idea of the Snares to Wares course came. Now, this course is unique in a way that it 100% empowers students to sit in management roles and make very serious decisions about the direction of the Snares to Wares initiative, the material, that not only the direction, but how we are going to get there. So the house is being done in-house, and then also it's directly influencing on how that movement, that direction is being achieved. So it's kind of looping around and learning from their own mistakes. The course is very different in that it is not being pushed down the throats of the students like you see in a typical learning environment where one expert is coming and drumming sense into the students. Rather, it's just a gateway into which students from all the four current departments are using their everyday interactions with their skill set to then design ways of making the course run. And the course itself is a business. And so it's unique in every way you can imagine. The other thing about the Snares to Wares course, in the long term especially, it will be in the way it evolves with the project. Because they have been started at about the same time, I personally envision a time where the Snares to Wares course will be an idea and less about the products themselves. So it will shift away from, say, selling crafts to selling and designing ideas that work in perpetuity and are not limited by the product or markets or whatever. And these will be always refreshed because every year there will be a cohort of new students. So it doesn't need to be fine-tuned like it's a business that needs to have an annual meeting and evaluation. Students coming in will have the same powers as the previous students, and this will be very good because every year there will be a new kind of, we would say, a new CEO or a new board of directors to change things around and improve and bring in the new tools that will be available. So the future can only be said to be bright, and I have no doubt that a student-led course at that level is the best way that Snares to Wares can be managed.
Yeah.
As soon as I graduate from Michigan State University, I'll be shifting to Makerere University, where I will teach in the Department of Entomology, Fisheries Science, and Zoology. And my role there will be continuing to train a whole new generation of conservation biologists. All right, now that is the professional life as I would like to take it. That will be my profession, a teacher. However, I want to continue being associated with not only Snares to Wares, but projects that look like Snares to Wares. So these are projects that come out of local people's existing conditions, projects that benefit conservation, projects that bridge the barrier between several continents, like we have the Snares to Wares bridging the gap between people in Uganda and the students here of Michigan State University. So I want to continue my life being involved and nurturing such projects. To be a bit specific to Snares to Wares, I will always be a friend of Snares to Wares, but I don't want Snares to Wares initiative to be defined by my contribution or not contribution. It would rather be defined by how much potential it has got in itself. My view is that if Snares to Wares is successful, then it should be able to run and exist beyond the timeline of individuals, and that includes myself and all the other members of Snares to Wares. That's when we will have one exactly, not having to worry that as soon as somebody shifts gears and then the whole thing falls down. I think to me the biggest takeaway message is that the more you allow yourself to absorb different information, the better you get. By this I mean if you are exposed to only one set of values, one set of ideas, then you are not as likely to succeed as somebody who has been fed from a much more diverse, open, and sometimes challenging societal situation. And so I want to go away, or I want to travel back to my country and introduce a system where we can have not only diversity in the way we teach, like maybe conservation biology, which tries to pull in so many subjects, but also in the way we operate our lives, in the way we design projects, in the way we mentor students and things like that. So I've been privileged to be part of Recap Lab, which is the most diverse lab in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. So that environment, one, is very welcoming to every person, because there will always be something that you have in common. But also by having so many differences in the lab, because of our origins, because of our tastes, because of what we are all interested in, then we also get to learn a lot from the different areas. So that has been a very wonderful experience that I hope to replicate. That idea cannot be taught, and so if you told somebody diversity is very good, it is not easy for them to take it. Rather, if they experience it, it is very easy for them, because soon the benefits are very obvious. And so I will live my life for trying to promote situations which encourage people to work jointly. My opinion is there is no completely right way of doing most of the things that we do, especially in conservation. Or there is no like ridiculously out of the world idea that you can imagine in conservation. So most of the things will work to a certain degree or the other. Now, what defines really exceptional, groundbreaking, or unique and really sustainable projects from my experience has been very simple, very easy to see, very easy to do kind of projects and research. So the less we try to chase complexity, the more we try to chase complexity, rather, the less we are likely to meet the especially needs of the community in which we work. And I would say that Snares to Wares is one such example. It's very simple. Everything is there for us to see. people are very poor. And you know that a very poor person will behave in a certain way, or you'd expect them to find a way of surviving. And so Snares to Wares initiative comes up with a very easy, straightforward answer, and there is no doubt that we will be successful. And so my advice to everybody is that one is understand that there are very many and diverse ways of doing conservation. Most of them have got some impact, but if you want to be really very exceptional, is that go for the simplest way and always work for the people where you are working.